Hey students, welcome to week 8 of P4, Proverbs during pandemic for Plymouth Park. I'm not really big into poetry, but there's one poem by Robert Frost that's very well known. You've probably read it before yourself. It's called The Road Not Taken. And in the poem, Frost describes a traveler who comes to a fork in the road and he has to decide which path we can take. And the reason that I like this poem so much is because we can pretty much all relate to it, because every day we have to make choices. Do I do right? Do I do wrong? Do I turn left or do I turn right? Do I study or do I watch TV? Do I tell the truth or do I tell a lie? We have to make all kinds of decisions all the time, right? And when you look at the big picture, all of these decisions really fall into one of two categories: the way of the righteous or the way of the wicked, the way of wisdom or the way of foolishness or folly. And this is exactly what we're going to see in today's Proverbs, and that's Proverbs chapter 4, verses 10 through 19. And in these verses, King Solomon is talking to his son, as he has been all throughout the beginning chapters of Proverbs, and he's showing him these two paths, laying out these two paths, and he's clearly urging him to take the path of the righteous and to at all costs avoid the path of the wicked. So listen, and you can grab a Bible and follow along as I read Proverbs chapter 4, verses 10 through 19. It says, "Listen, my son, accept my words, and you will live many years. I am teaching you the way of wisdom. I am guiding you on straight paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hindered. When you run, you will not stumble. Hold on to instruction. Don't let go. Guard it, for it is your life." Verse 14, "Don't set foot on the path of the wicked. Don't proceed in the way of evil ones. Avoid it. Don't travel on it. Turn away from it and pass by it. For they can't sleep unless they have done what is evil. They are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. They eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, shining brighter and brighter until midday. But the way of the wicked is like the darkest gloom. They don't know what makes them stumble." So in verses 10 through 13, he's telling his son about the way of wisdom, about this straight path, and where there's safety and where there's freedom to run. And in the way of wisdom, he says it's full of instruction, it's full of understanding, and it leads to a long life. And Solomon, he's telling his son, do this. He's saying, take this path. He's saying, walk in the way of wisdom. And then in verse 14 comes the contrast, where Solomon warns his son to stay far, far away from the road of the wicked. In verse 15, he actually comes up with 4 different ways to tell him no. He says, avoid it, don't travel on it, turn away from it, pass by it. He wants to make sure that his son, he wants to make sure that we today even get the point, that we get the picture. Stay away from the way of the wicked. Verse 16 is a huge one. He says that the way of the wicked is, it will consume your life. He says you won't be able to sleep unless you've done evil. It's like a bad habit. It's an itch that must be scratched. It's like a drug. Clearly, this is the road of the wicked, the road of evil that we want to avoid at all costs. So we have the path of the righteous and we have the path or the way of the wicked. And Solomon, he summarizes all this for us in verses 18 and 19 using the metaphors of light and darkness. He says that the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn. It just gets brighter and brighter until midday. And he said the way of the wicked is like the darkest gloom. And they don't even know why they do what they do. So we have the way of the righteous and the way of the wicked. And we make hundreds of decisions on a daily basis. And of course, some decisions that we make are much more important than others. But really what we're seeing is that all of these decisions boil down to choosing between one of two ways. We can be obedient or we can be disobedient. We can be wise or we can be foolish. We can choose to be in the light or to be in the darkness. We can choose to live righteously or to live wickedly. And this concept is all throughout the Proverbs, but it's also in other places in the Bible outside of Proverbs. Psalm chapter 1 verse 6 says, "The Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to ruin, it leads to destruction." So that's in the Psalms. And then Jesus, in his Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 7, 13 and 14, he says this, he says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is broad that leads to destruction, and there is many who go through it." But then he says in verse 14, "How narrow is the gate and difficult the road that leads to life, and few find it." So we come to that fork in the road every day. Actually, multiple times a day we come to that fork in the road. And we don't always have time to sit there and think about the decision that we're going to make. And that is why we need to make the lifelong decision to walk in the way of wisdom, to take the way of righteousness. And the first step on that path is to place your faith in Jesus and accept his salvation and to receive the forgiveness of sins. And then from that point on, we must resolve to honor Jesus and to honor the gospel with every single decision that we make. So every day we need to choose to take the path of light, the path of righteousness, the path of wisdom, and the path, as King Solomon says, that leads to life. Will you do that?